welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey to really understand ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We've got a fascinating chapter here. It really unpacks the traits of ADHD. Our mission, to pull out the key insights, maybe clear up some common misunderstandings, and truly grasp the nuances of this neurodevelopmental condition.
Yeah.
Our goal is for you, the listener, to finish this feeling genuinely informed, like you've gained a deeper understanding, but hopefully without feeling too overwhelmed. Okay, let's get into it.
Exactly. And this chapter, it gives us a really solid starting point. ADHD is, well, fundamentally, it's a neurodevelopmental condition, meaning it relates to how the brain develops and functions, over time. It's characterized by difficulties with attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity.
Okay.
Think of neurotransmitters like messengers in the brain. They help different parts talk to each other. In ADHD, these messengers, maybe they have a bit of trouble getting their signals across as effectively. And what's really fascinating is just how differently this can show up from one person to the next.
Absolutely. And the chapter helps break down those core characteristics, doesn't it?
It does.
We're looking at inattention. That means someone might find it really, really hard to stay focused. They might struggle to follow instructions all the way through, often misplace things. You know the type.
Definitely.
Then there's hyperactivity and impulsivity. This could look like trouble sitting still, or maybe acting on thoughts really quickly without sort of fully thinking through the consequences.
Yeah, that immediate reaction.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the combined type, where you see a bit of both. It's also interesting, the chapter notes that what we used to call ADD, well, that's now understood mostly as the inattentive presentation of ADHD.
Right, the terminology has shifted. And what's also fascinating here is how the chapter clarifies the difference between ADHD and ASD, autism spectrum disorder.
Okay, yeah, that comes up a lot.
It does. And while they're both neurodevelopmental conditions, ASD is primarily characterized by difficulties in social communication and often a tendency towards more rigid behaviors. It's important to remember, though, that while they are distinct, they can sometimes overlap in the same person.
Right, they can co-occur. Good point. And a point that I think often surprises people is that ADHD isn't something people just grow out of.
No, that's a big misconception.
We often picture that really energetic kid in the classroom, right? But the chapter makes it clear that many adults continue to experience these characteristics. And here's where it gets really interesting. While that really obvious hyperactivity we see in kids might lessen as they get older.
Yeah, it often does. Social norms, maybe.
Right. But inattentiveness and impulsivity often become more noticeable in adults. Think about the challenges of meeting work deadlines, managing priorities, or, actually sticking to the plans you make.
So it's less about a phase ending and more about how these characteristics evolve and manifest differently. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's important to recognize some of the secondary challenges adults with ADHD might face. Things like maybe lower self-esteem, increased stress levels, and sometimes even feelings of depression or anxiety. These can sometimes arise from, navigating a world that isn't always set up to support how their brains naturally function.
That makes sense. The chapter also sheds light on something really important: how ADHD can present differently in males and females.
Yes, this is crucial.
In males, particularly in childhood, that hyperactivity and impulsivity, they tend to be more outwardly visible, right? So that often leads to earlier diagnosis.
It often does, yeah. Easier to spot in a classroom setting, perhaps.
But in females, it's apparently more common to see the inattentive presentation. And that can be less obvious, less disruptive, maybe.
Right, quieter.
Which can lead to diagnoses being delayed or sometimes even missed altogether. The chapter even touches on how different social expectations for men and women can influence how these characteristics actually show up in their behavior.
Which really raises an important question about how our societal expectations can shape our understanding or misunderstanding of ADHD.
Totally.
The fact that those inattentive characteristics in girls might be overlooked or maybe just put down to personality. Oh, she's just quiet or a bit dreamy.
Yeah, daydreamer.
Exactly. It really highlights the need for a more nuanced view of how this condition can look across different genders.
So what are the typical approaches then for helping people with ADHD? The chapter outlines a combination of things, doesn't it?
It does. It's usually multifaceted.
We're talking about medication, like methylphenidate,
Ritalin, Concerta,
and atomoxetine.
Yeah.
These can help regulate those neurotransmitters in the brain, those messengers we mentioned, making it potentially easier to focus, reducing impulsivity.
But a key insight here, and the chapter stresses this, is that medication manages symptoms. It's not a cure.
Right. Not a cure.
And working alongside medication very often is behavioral therapy. This focuses more on developing positive lifestyle habits and cognitive strategies.
Like what kind of things?
Well, think of things like creating action plans or making specific changes to your surroundings, your environment to better support focus and organization. It's really about learning coping mechanisms and practical strategies for navigating those everyday challenges.
Okay. Now, let's tackle a big misconception. One, the chapter really hits hard. Yeah. That ADHD is just about being lazy.
Yeah, that one's damaging.
The chapter strongly refutes this. It explains that the characteristics really stem from differences in brain function. Like, for instance, if someone with inattentive ADHD struggles to focus in a meeting, it's often because their brain isn't getting enough sort of stimulating input to maintain that focus. It's not because they don't want to pay attention.
Exactly. It's a physiological thing. And hyperactivity or impulsivity isn't just, poor manners or being rude. It's often related to those differences in neurotransmitter regulation.
It's just a different way the brain is wired.
Yeah.
And the chapter encourages us to reframe these features, not just as disabilities, but also as traits.
Yes, that reframing is so important.
Because while there are definitely challenges, individuals with ADHD can also show incredible hyperfocus when they're deeply engaged in something that really captures their interest.
Absolutely laser focus.
And they might also have a real knack for generating very original, out-of-the-box ideas.
Which leads to a really empowering point the chapter makes. Finding an environment, or maybe a job, that actually uses these traits. That can be a total game changer. Yeah. It can lead to real success and, just as importantly, a sense of fulfillment. It really underscores the importance of understanding both for the individual and for those around them and moving past those unhelpful prejudices and stereotypes.
Yeah, ditch the prejudice.
And ultimately, the chapter advocates for viewing ADHD as an individual characteristic rather than some kind of shortcoming. This shift in perspective is just so vital for fostering better understanding and allowing individuals to live more authentically. It's about recognizing and, ideally, valuing the diversity in how our brains work.
Let's go a little deeper into the medication aspect then. The chapter reminds us, again, medication can be a really helpful tool for easing symptoms, but it doesn't completely cure ADHD.
Right. Managing, not curing.
It's more about improving the day-to-day experience.
Yeah.
And it neatly categorizes the main types, right? We have the central nervous system stimulants, like methylphenidate, you might know it as Ritalin or Concerta.
Those are common ones, yeah.
Which work by adjusting levels of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. That helps with attention and reduces impulsivity and hyperactivity. Think of stimulants as maybe like turning up the volume on the brain's focus ability.
That's a decent analogy. And then there are the non-stimulants like atomoxetine or Strattera. These primarily affect norepinephrine and tend to have perhaps a gentler effect, often with fewer side effects, which can make them a good option for some people who maybe don't tolerate stimulants well. Non-stimulants are perhaps more like fine-tuning the brain's focus over a longer period.
And the chapter outlines some specific ways medication can help, right?
Yeah.
Like it can make it easier to concentrate in meetings or remember instructions, reduce those impulsive reactions.
Definitely. For children, it can contribute to better performance in school, improve social interactions. And for adults, it might lead to greater productivity at work, maybe more stability in family life. Ultimately, just improving overall well-being and quality of life.
However, and this is a big however, it's just as important to understand the limitations.
Crucial.
The effects typically last only while the medication is active, right?
Yeah.
So the characteristics can resurface as it wears off.
Yep. It's not a permanent change. And there are also potential side effects, which can really vary from person to person. Stimulants might sometimes cause issues like sleep problems or maybe reduced appetite, while non-stimulants could lead to things like nausea or fatigue. And crucially, medication isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It might not work for everyone, or the benefits might be limited for some individuals.
That's a really important point. The chapter emphasizes that medication alone isn't some magic bullet.
Far from it.
Lasting improvements often need to include those environmental and behavioral strategies we talked about earlier. Like, if someone's job really doesn't align with their natural strengths and challenges related to ADHD...
Right. A bad fit.
Medication alone might not completely solve, say, concentration difficulties in that specific context. It really highlights that medication is just one piece of the puzzle.
One part of a comprehensive approach, yeah. It works best when used alongside other supportive strategies.
And the chapter directly addresses some common misunderstandings, like the idea that medication is a cure that really overestimates what it can realistically do.
Sets up false expectations.
But on the other hand, the belief that it's inherently dangerous and should never be relied upon, that's an overly negative and often inaccurate view too.
Right. When used appropriately, under proper medical guidance, it can be a very valuable form of support for many people.
It's also interesting how the goals and maybe the effects of medication can differ between children and adults.
Yeah, the focus can shift.
For children, the main goal is often reducing those disruptive behaviors in school or daily life, which can then help with developing social skills.
Makes sense. Creating space for learning social cues.
But for adults, it often focuses more on supporting their ability to manage responsibilities at work, at home, helping with things like reducing errors due to inattention, or maybe improving relationships that might be strained by impulsivity.
And to reiterate that key takeaway, medication for ADHD is about managing symptoms, not curing the condition.
Right.
Having that understanding is so crucial for setting realistic expectations and integrating medication effectively into daily life if it's chosen as part of the plan. The chapter strongly advises against relying solely on medication.
Yeah, it keeps coming back to that.
It highlights the parallel importance of behavioral therapy, making those adjustments to your environment, and really, truly understanding and leveraging your own individual strengths and characteristics.
So the big picture here seems to be that effective support for ADHD involves really getting to grips with and accepting your individual characteristics.
Acceptance is huge.
Medication can be a helpful tool on that journey, maybe, but it's definitely not a simple fix. It's more about learning to live alongside ADHD in a way that allows you to thrive and use your unique strengths.
Well said. Now, let's explore how ADHD can show up differently across different life stages and also between genders. The chapter gives a really clear picture of these varying manifestations.
Okay.
In childhood, for instance, we often see that more pronounced hyperactivity, things like difficulty staying seated for long, maybe wandering around the classroom, interrupting others.
Yeah, the classic picture.
There's also that impulsivity and the challenge of focusing on tasks that aren't particularly engaging. Although that intense focus we call hyperfocus can certainly emerge when a topic is really high interest.
But unfortunately, these childhood behaviors can sometimes lead to labels, right? Like restless or problem child.
Sadly, yes.
And that can have a real impact on a child's experience in school, their self-esteem, their relationships with peers.
Absolutely. Then, as individuals move into adulthood, that more obvious, overt hyperactivity often becomes less outwardly apparent, maybe due to learned self-regulation or social expectations.
Right. You learn to mask it a bit.
Perhaps. However, inattentiveness and impulsivity tend to become more prominent, or at least their impact becomes more noticeable in adult roles.
How so?
Well, this might look like struggling to communicate concisely, difficulties with organization, meeting deadlines, challenges with planning ahead, or maybe acting on sudden impulses without fully considering the fallout. These kinds of challenges can significantly impact work and home life.
And are often unfairly misinterpreted as just laziness or lack of motivation.
Exactly. That misunderstanding persists.
And when we look at gender differences, the chapter points out again, males often diagnosed earlier, largely because that childhood hyperactivity, impulsivity is just more readily observed.
More disruptive, perhaps, in a traditional classroom.
Right. But females are more likely to present with the inattentive type, which, as we said, can be less disruptive outwardly, leading to later diagnoses, or even being missed entirely.
Yeah, signs like appearing spaced out or being easily distracted, forgetful, these might be attributed to personality traits or upbringing rather than being recognized as part of ADHD.
Oh, she's just got her head in the clouds.
Precisely. And these gender-based differences, they can continue into adulthood. Men might be seen as unreliable due to mistakes at work or impulsive decisions, whereas women might struggle with forgetfulness or difficulties with planning, maybe juggling household management and work. And there's often that added societal pressure on women to manage multiple roles flawlessly.
Yeah, the superwoman expectation.
Which can amplify the impact of ADHD characteristics and contribute to lower self-esteem and increased stress.
What's really insightful, though, is the chapter's point that these differences aren't solely due to changes in the core features of ADHD itself.
No, the context matters hugely.
Social environments and what's expected of us externally play a significant role. Classroom behavior is key for kids. Workplace and family roles become more central for adults.
And even if the outward signs seem less obvious in adults, that internal experience of stress, of difficulty, of feeling overwhelmed, that can really intensify.
Yeah, social expectations and gender roles really influence both how ADHD is expressed and how it's perceived, and ultimately whether it gets diagnosed.
That societal expectation for males to be active and females to be quiet can contribute to what some call a silent struggle for women with ADHD.
That makes sense.
It's a crucial reminder that ADHD typically begins in childhood and often continues into adulthood, just manifesting in different ways depending on age, gender, and crucially, the environment.
And recognizing these differences is so vital for providing the right kind of support, the right understanding, and ultimately improving someone's quality of life.
Absolutely. The chapter encourages viewing these characteristics not as inherent flaws, but as starting points for understanding individual strengths and abilities.
Right, leading to better ways of living, more supportive environments.
It really emphasizes the importance of considering all these perspectives, children, adults, males, females, for a truly comprehensive and effective approach to support.
The chapter then illustrates these points with some very relatable examples. Let's take childhood restlessness.
Okay.
It's often one of the first things people around a child might notice. And it's not just physical fidgeting, is it? It also includes that mental restlessness, the easily shifting attention.
Right. And the chapter points out that children themselves might not even be aware at first that their behavior is different from their peers.
That's right. You might see a child who has trouble staying seated, who frequently wanders around, interrupts conversations, or maybe gets overly involved in what other kids are doing.
And this often leads to reprimands from teachers or parents, which can be confusing for a child who doesn't necessarily understand why they're behaving this way or why it's seen as wrong.
What's insightful is the explanation of that difficulty in regulating internal energy. A child might focus intensely on something fascinating,
Hyperfocus again.
but then completely lose focus on a task they find unengaging, getting easily distracted. It's often perceived as lack of concentration or patience, but for the child, it's often just a natural response to what grabs their attention.
Sadly, yeah. And this can lead to that innate curiosity, that desire to move and explore, being met with disapproval, which can really start to erode their self-confidence early on.
And it's not just the physical movement, is it? The chapter also talks about mental restlessness, racing thoughts, the mind wandering during lessons.
Yeah, that example of a child's mind drifting off to a TV show instead of the blackboard.
Right. It highlights how even if a child intends to pay attention, their focus can just involuntarily shift elsewhere.
And the environment plays such a significant role here. Strict, highly structured settings might really stigmatize a child experiencing restlessness, whereas more flexible environments might actually allow that energy and curiosity to flourish, to be channeled productively. But given that childhood often involves a lot of rules and expectations,
Yeah, sit still, be quiet.
restlessness often gets a negative reaction. And children become aware of it through those external comments, "Why can't you just sit still?" which can lead them to internalize the idea that their restlessness is somehow bad.
It's interesting how that early restlessness evolves. While the more overt hyperactivity might lessen with age as self-control develops,
It often does.
that underlying tendency to have difficulty sustaining focus or having shifting interests often remains. And that feeling of being different can really persist into adulthood.
Which is why the chapter emphasizes the importance of not simply trying to suppress that restlessness, but rather finding positive, constructive ways to channel that energy.
Because at its core, that childhood restlessness is often an outward expression of energy, curiosity, even creativity.
Exactly. By accepting it, helping a child find healthy outlets, it can actually become a springboard for developing a unique perspective and innovative thinking.
The chapter then delves into a really interesting dynamic. Being perceived as maybe annoying or too noisy, yet still finding acceptance within social circles.
Yes, that paradox.
It connects this to that blend of ADHD-driven energy and sociability, coupled with the difficulty in regulating impulses. So that tendency to talk too much, it isn't just a personality quirk. it can be a direct manifestation of ADHD.
One key factor is impulsivity, right? That strong urge to verbalize thoughts immediately, almost a fear that if the thought isn't spoken right then, it'll lose its meaning or relevance.
Yeah, or just disappear.
Right, and there's also that rapid association of ideas, which leads to tangents, interruptions. While sometimes this can be entertaining, it can easily become overwhelming for listeners.
And the role of positive reinforcement here is quite insightful. Getting laughter or attention can be a real motivator.
Feeds into it.
Inadvertently boosting self-esteem, but actually intensifying the talking, maybe even to the point of overwhelming others. It highlights that heightened sensitivity to external feedback.
It also touches on that challenge with self-monitoring, that ability to sort of observe your own behavior from the outside.
Right.
When someone with ADHD gets deeply engaged in a moment or a topic, it can be really difficult to gauge the impact of their speech on others. It makes it challenging to adjust the pace or the amount of talking, especially when feeling excited or enthusiastic.
And there's often that moment of reflection afterward, isn't there? That awareness of, oh, I might have talked too much again.
Yes, that post-interaction analysis.
But then the same pattern can repeat. It really underscores how deeply ingrained this can be due to those underlying challenges with impulsivity and attention regulation. The chapter also mentions how difficulty regulating interests and emotions contributes hard to hold back enthusiasm, failing to notice listener fatigue.
And this whole experience often leads to that internal questioning. Is this just my personality, or is there something else going on? The mixed feedback, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, can make it particularly difficult to change these patterns.
But the chapter also points out talking a lot isn't inherently negative.
No, not at all.
It can be a real asset in certain situations, presentations, negotiations, even just adding humor and energy to conversations.
True. The key, as the chapter emphasizes, is developing the ability to manage the content and the amount of speech. It suggests practical strategies, like being mindful of the listener's interest, maybe trying to keep track of speaking time, pausing to invite others in.
Right.
Ultimately, it reframes that tendency as an ADHD-related characteristic that, when understood and channeled effectively, can actually enhance communication rather than hinder it.
Moving on, the chapter addresses struggles in school life, the dilemma of focus and missing details. It really draws a line between difficulties from, say, a lack of study skills and those rooted in ADHD concentration challenges.
Yes, and this is often where confusion can really set in, especially when there's a gap between how a student is perceived by others, they're not trying, and their own internal experience. I am trying, but I can't focus.
Right. So a student lacking study skills might not know how to organize information or plan effectively. But with ADHD, even if someone understands good study methods, actually implementing them is the hurdle because attention drifts so easily. That example of a random thought derailing focus during a lecture, that really resonates.
And that tendency for attention to wander is particularly pronounced when the subject isn't inherently stimulating.
Yeah, boring stuff is hard.
Exactly. Without that engaging input, the brain just doesn't latch on readily. Even a minor external distraction, something happening outside the window, can easily pull focus, leading to a fragmented understanding of the material.
The chapter also highlights difficulty with prioritizing tasks. New information or assignments can feel so immediate, so urgent.
Like everything is priority one.
Right. Which leads to postponing important homework or studying, then rushing at the last minute, maybe turning in half-finished work, and again, often mistakenly seen as lack of planning or laziness, causing distress for the student.
The chapter also brings in the concept of impaired executive functioning. Think of executive functions like the brain's manager planning, organizing, staying on track.
Okay.
In ADHD, these managers can sometimes have a harder time coordinating tasks, maintaining short-term concentration to finish things. That example of switching from math to English vocabulary before finishing either, that really illustrates how attention gets diverted mid-task.
And then there's the flip side, hyperfocus.
Right, that intense concentration on captivating subjects, which can lead to great short-term productivity in one area.
Yeah, amazing knowledge about dinosaurs.
Exactly, but often at the expense of other responsibilities, like acing the history test but completely bombing the math exam you forgot to study for.
Ouch. And throughout these school years, it can be incredibly challenging for individuals to figure out, is this just me needing better study habits? Or is it these ADHD characteristics? That assumption of, I must just be lazy, can be really damaging.
And well-intentioned but generic advice, like just try harder, just focus more.
Yeah, doesn't help.
It can actually further erode self-esteem, creates feelings of inadequacy. I'm trying as hard as I can. Why isn't it working?
But the chapter offers some helpful strategies. It starts with gaining accurate self-understanding, then emphasizes finding study methods tailored to individual needs.
Like breaking tasks into smaller chunks.
Yeah, segmenting tasks, creating a low-stimulus learning environment, and importantly, finding ways to connect with the material personally, make it more engaging, can really help capture and maintain that focus.
Ultimately, addressing these school challenges requires flexible strategies aligned with individual strengths and difficulties. That process of self-reflection, understanding how ADHD impacts your learning, is key to implementing more effective approaches, which can improve grades, sure, but also boost self-confidence and help transform perceived weaknesses into potential strengths.
The chapter then shares a very specific and honestly quite memorable anecdote, a unique middle school episode, shooting at your own goal.
Ah, yes, the basketball story.
He paints this vivid picture, junior high practice, losing team, focus on rebounding, and then this unusual play.
Very unusual.
Our author gets an easy rebound, uncontested shot, misses, ball bounces back, another easy rebound, confident second shot, swish,
Hey.
into their own basket.
Oh, dear.
It's a wonderfully illustrative story, though. The chapter breaks down how this seemingly bizarre moment really reflects those core ADHD characteristics, impulsivity, and inattentiveness.
Right. There's that failure to fully process why the rebound was so easy the opponents had backed off, mistaking their positioning for personal improvement.
Yeah, wow, I'm getting good at this.
And then the complete lack of awareness of which basket was the target. That narrow focus on just rebound and shoot without registering the broader context of the court orientation.
That short-sighted attention, typical. And the delayed realization of the mistake is so key, isn't it?
Yes, that struggle with in-the-moment self-reflection, leading to repeating the error even after the first miss.
But what's so insightful about how the chapter presents this isn't just as a funny blunder.
No, it goes deeper.
It highlights a unique, even endearing side of living with ADHD. The key insight is how these moments happen, but reframing them fosters self-understanding, even humor.
Exactly. There's that oddly natural, unconcerned demeanor afterwards, that unself-conscious reaction, which maybe could be seen as a form of resilience.
Maybe. And the fact that the story itself becomes a source of amusement, warmth, when retold later, adding to the group dynamic. It reframes what seems negative into something positive, relatable.
It's a perfect example. Those seemingly negative aspects of ADHD can be viewed differently, become catalysts for self-understanding, even relaxed connection with others through shared laughter. Learning to accept, even appreciate those unique characteristics is such a valuable lesson.
The next section shifts focus to plans don't always work, diving into experiences around university entrance exams.
Right. This really highlights how inherent traits and motivations can sometimes clash head-on with traditional preparation methods, leading to unexpected results. It builds on earlier hints during high school applications.
That high school application anomaly is quite telling, isn't it? Applying to some obscure public high school the author wasn't even sure existed.
It definitely illustrates perspective a little out of sync with the average applicant.
And then, that mismatched study approached motivation purely in the joy of learning something new, with interest ending the moment understanding clicked. Zero interest in applying it for exams.
Such a contrast to the typical focus on cram schools, workbooks, test scope.
Which led to those consistently disappointing grades, despite appearing to study hard. That frustrating confusion, why aren't my grades improving?
And then the rather absurd failure of the safety net school, really highlighting that difficulty sticking to plans, even the safest ones, like that analogy of somehow slipping on a non-slip surface.
Exactly. And when it came to the university entrance exams, these issues really blew up. Missing key syllabus parts, getting totally absorbed in minor historical anecdotes of personal interest instead of exam-relevant stuff.
Right. The inability to force memorization without that personal interest hook.
It all culminated in that unsettling acceptance to university. A good school, sure, but lacking that joy or accomplishment because the whole process felt misaligned with natural tendencies. The plan was doomed because it wasn't a good fit.
And the crucial learning here is it wasn't just difficulty creating plans, but the significant challenge of following through without deep self-understanding. Those distractions from new interests constantly pulled focus away from original goals.
Patterns later recognized as cognitive characteristics.
Exactly. The university entrance exams became a really valuable, if tough, lesson in the complexities of plan execution and the absolute necessity of self-awareness. Copying other strategies just doesn't work if it doesn't fit you.
The chapter then shares some amusing failures born from limits in memory and attention, starting with the FBI profiler dream.
Ah, yes. Clear motivation, decisive action, majoring in psychology abroad specifically for this goal.
Driven. But then the rather jarring realization third year in about the U.S. citizen requirement.
Oof, a fundamental criterion completely overlooked for 2 whole years of focused study.
It's a perfect example acting on impulse, pursuing a goal with passion, but without that thorough initial research or planning. A common ADHD characteristic pattern.
Painful, avoidable setback. But the chapter reframes it well, highlighting the valuable knowledge gained anyway and the important lesson learned about careful planning and details.
Right, the setback led to reconsidering the approach, maybe adopting more realistic strategies later.
Then there are the college entrance exam experiences back in Japan. Genuine passion for Waseda, intense cramming on past papers, also aiming for Kyo, SFC. Ambitious.
But then, a teacher introduces the TOEFL exam, all English format, captivating,
Sparked a new interest.
leading to an abrupt shift in priorities and time, neglecting the original university exam prep to focus on TOEFL alongside everything else.
It's that familiar pattern again, isn't it? Intense initial enthusiasm, decisive action, but then lack of thorough planning, easily sidetracked by new, interesting information, veering off course.
Tied to impulsivity, difficulty maintaining consistent focus.
And while the TOEFL prep did prove useful later for studying abroad, it directly contributed to missing the initial university admission goals.
The chapter reflects on that recurring inability to effectively differentiate between necessary actions for long-term goals and just interesting diversions.
Even with a clear objective, sticking to the path was a struggle.
But again, there's a positive spin highlighted, that tendency to embrace new challenges, explore interests, can also fuel creativity and adaptability in the long run.
True. Though the immediate results were mediocre due to juggling too much, those experiences ultimately provided valuable lessons in planning, prioritization, and crucial self-awareness. Failures became stepping stones.
Next, the chapter discusses the contrasting performance in English versus Japanese language studies.
Yes, the rapid progress in English compared to the slower development in Japanese language and literature scores. It prompted considering how ADHD might influence learning across different subjects.
The chapter offers some really insightful reasons. The constant novelty and stimulation in English, new vocabulary, grammar seem to lead to smooth absorption. Sensitivity to rhythm and sound aided listening and pronunciation.
And the frequent short-term rewards, understanding a new phrase, short text, seemed to suit the learning style. Plus, the novelty of a foreign language itself provided engagement.
Whereas Japanese offered fewer of those quick wins, longer passages needed sustained concentration. Comprehending authorial intent required tolerating ambiguity.
Confidence could dip with wrong answers or mismatched reasoning. Lack of immediate positive feedback drained motivation. And the familiarity of it as a daily language maybe lacked that spark of discovery.
Could be. And the challenges with summarizing Japanese text, constructing logical arguments. That really highlights those core ADHD difficulties. Easily dispersed attention, thoughts branching off, making it hard to identify key points and organize ideas.
Writing tasks became time-consuming, reinforcing an aversion.
The key insight here is how significantly learning outcomes were influenced by the alignment or misalignment of learning style and content with underlying ADHD characteristics.
And the chapter mentions developing specific strategies that eventually helped with Japanese, like breaking reading into shorter segments, outlining essays with bullet points.
Right. It underscores how understanding your own learning style and the impact of these traits allows for a more targeted approach to tackling difficulties, leading to greater self-awareness and growth.
The chapter then shares a really pivotal moment, blooming in college abroad, a self-taught learning style. It starts with the father's impactful, almost harsh words.
Yeah, you won't be accepted in Japan anymore, so if you're good at English, go to America.
Coming right after the disappointment over Japanese university exams.
A significant turning point. It was seemingly severe, but the chapter unpacks how, amidst that feeling of defeat, the suggestion of leveraging English skills in America sparked a new sense of possibility. Escape, maybe, but also a new challenge.
Even approaching the Waseda exam felt like a final attempt before moving on.
The author reflects on that fundamental mismatch with the Japanese system, its rigor-valuing planning, meticulous attention, strong memorization, all challenging areas, compared to thriving when learning new things at one's own pace, like with English. The incompatibility was clear.
So the father's tough advice actually became the crucial push towards focusing on strengths in a potentially more suitable environment. Failure in Japan was maybe less about ability, more about ineffective methods for that individual.
Looking back, that decision broadened horizons, propelled the author towards a new challenge. Studying abroad transformed perceived failure into learning, built confidence and success not found in the Japanese system. That seemingly cruel remark held real potential.
Then the chapter moves to the very rushed preparation for the U.S., barely 2 or 3 months. Very limited English proficiency.
That blend of resignation and defiant optimism, I'll figure it out when I get there.
And the practical steps, finding day labor jobs for spending money. Proactive, despite the anxiety about culture and language.
The chapter touches on ineffective language study attempts, how the booked plane ticket forced action, even without feeling ready. Underscores the importance of just taking that first step.
The chapter vividly describes the initial U.S. experience, starting right at dorm check-in. Total inability to communicate basic needs.
Yeah, that shock of the language barrier. The RA's English sounding utterly incomprehensible, mind going blank.
Relying on smiles, basic phrases like, what? Say it again, nodding. Even saying yes, without understanding, just hoping for the best.
Highlights the vulnerability, but also the potential for kindness. The RA eventually figuring it out and giving the key.
The realization that people might help if they see you struggling, and successfully navigating that first hurdle, even awkwardly, provided a tiny spark of confidence for the daunting road ahead. Okay, maybe I can move forward.
The chapter then beautifully explains how English fluency gradually developed. And crucially, not through grammar rules, but willingness to let go of perfect speech.
Yes, that mindset shift. It's okay if I make mistakes as long as I want to communicate. That was key. Prior fixation on perfection had hindered speaking.
Finding genuine joy in just being understood in everyday life, friends, supermarket, regardless of grammar. Shifting from correctness to the fun of connection.
Learning through real-life conversations, situations. Imitating movie lines, exchanging greetings, picking up natural phrases instead of memorizing rules.
And the positive reactions from others, those smiles for broken English, reinforcing that it's okay to fail mantra, replacing perfectionism.
Even a nerve-wracking class presentation became pivotal. Deciding to just express oneself, seeing classmates nodding encouragingly, built confidence. Showed how not fearing mistakes unlocked communication.
So the key wasn't purely technical, it was psychological. Focusing on communication over perfection, embracing mistakes, finding joy in speaking that opened possibilities.
The chapter also describes developing an unconscious habit of mimicking native English speakers. Became surprisingly important for natural improvement. Started almost without realizing it.
The initial perception was native speech being too fast, too complex.
But then came a shift towards feeling the language. Listening closely, quietly repeating phrases, "What's up? Oh my God," with the same rhythm, intonation heard from friends, TV, absorbing expressions, pacing, pronunciation.
Started unconsciously mentally repeating overheard chatter, movie lines, then muttering softly as practice.
Progressed to conscious use. Wanting to use those phrases in conversation, gradually speaking them aloud, worked because it engaged with living English.
Learning nuances, slang, contractions, emotional tones, unique speech patterns, not just dictionary definitions. Improved comprehensibility, sounded more natural.
And the advantage of self-practice. No pressure of interaction, free practice without embarrassment, embracing trial and error.
That pivotal moment. Using a practice phrase, friends delighted. Wow, that sounded really native. Validated efforts, boosted confidence hugely.
Marked a real shift. English went from foreign language to a language I can use. Accumulated rhythms, expressions through imitation, leading to natural use. Fun, low-pressure learning, remarkably effective.
Next, the chapter asks, why was band activity the only thing that worked? Underscores how the band became a vital anchor in America.
Yeah, helped to rebuild a sense of self after those initial language and cultural struggles. Music offered expression, connection beyond words, found a place to shine.
Joining almost by chance, seeing that band members wanted poster, beginners welcome, love music being key, decisive action became a turning point.
Within that musical world, music took precedence over words, connected naturally with members through music despite halting English. Communication and performances via rhythm, melody hardly felt the language handicap, found space for emotional, individual expression.
And it wasn't just fun. Band ignited a dormant passion. Joy of conveying self through sound in live shows. Audience smiles. Clapping created connection. Realizing presence reached others despite imperfect English. A starting point for confidence elsewhere.
The supportive bandmates were crucial too. Never laughed at language struggles, deepened communication through jams, rehearsals, offered advice on expressions, chatted about music, life after playing, strengthening friendships.
The chapter concludes, the band provided more than musical skill. It fostered honest self-expression, joy of belonging. Language barriers meant little in music. Allowed unleashing passion, individuality, rediscovering true self.
Looking back, the band brought greatest healing, reaffirmed purpose. Friends, experiences, joy of self-expression through music made study abroad vibrant, instilled strong future confidence. Band life sustained, gave strength.
The chapter then delves into experiencing real English, contrasting it sharply with that clean textbook version.
Right. Local English America, UK, completely different. Not like Disney characters. Native English with slang, spoken fast. Realized classroom English was a sheltered environment.
Initial impression. Sounded like a different language despite grammatical correctness. Words blended, linking, shortened, slurred, incomprehensible. Frequent slang, unique phrases. Memorizing words wasn't enough.
Difficulty with slang, regional expressions, what's up, you're killing it. Needed context initially. Jokes, sarcasm, even harder.
Gradual adjustment took time, trial and error. Initially just smiled. Got through encounters without understanding. Occasional attempts to understand. Could you repeat? Often unsuccessful due to speed.
But exposure to real English helped ears adjust. Daily life immersion, imitating movies, dramas, repeating friends' phrases helped develop a sense of rhythm, intonation.
And the importance of addressing unknowns, noting slang, looking it up, asking friends.
Key learning. Just communicate, not aim for perfection. Continuous attempts to speak, even with mistakes, led to picking up more words, usable phrases.
Conclusion. Local English was a different world, a harsh challenge, but exposure to living English and developing usable skills was tremendous growth. Initial overwhelm gradually replaced by ownership.
The chapter then explains how the band itself formed, despite that initial language barrier, experiencing communication beyond language.
Playing drums was the starting point. Conversation with a guitarist showed music as a common language.
Shared genre became key. Loved metal, mentioned wanting a metal guitarist. Music lovers responded, metal. A simple key to move forward despite unclear verbal expression, decided to play together through shared taste.
Instrumental communication took over in the first session. Song suggestions understood through played riffs. Music itself was a powerful communication tool.
Music compensated for the language barrier. Metal technique, intensity, passion brought like-minded members. Understanding through favorite bands, songs allowed band formation.
And gradual language acquisition happened over sessions, rehearsals, common phrases. Music terms picked up naturally.
Key learning. Passion, shared goals have greater power than language sometimes. Band activities overcame the barrier and improved English communication skills. Initial anxiety turned into personal growth.
Then, a surprising difference in band culture. Japan versus America.
Right, in Japan, standard to start by covering other band songs. Improves technique, synchronization, learns song structure.
In America, this culture almost doesn't exist. Focus immediately on creating original songs. Favorite bands as reference points for elements? Maybe. But originals first.
Perceived cultural difference. Japan sees covers as foundational. America views music as self-expression, prioritizing original pieces from the start.
Pressure of no covers. In Japan, covers quickly sound like a real band. In America, building sound from scratch was fascinating but challenging.
Expanded perspective, though. Initial unease about originals gave way to joy of creation with bandmates. Live performance of own songs, unparalleled pleasure compared to covers.
Conclusion. Perception value of music varies greatly. Both approaches have merit. American band activities provided the new challenge of creating our own music, leading to deeper enjoyment.
Then insights about ADHD bandmates.
Yeah, America's environment. ADHD widely recognized, support available for adult children. Bandmates never hid traits, embraced them as individuality.
Unexpected strengths in band activities emerged. Difficulty planning long-term, acting on impulse, surprisingly worked well. Spontaneous ideas led to new riffs, melodies, impressing others, intuitive idea formation.
Dynamic rehearsals. Quickly bored with repetition, wanted to try new things immediately. Sometimes confusing, but sparked new songs, arrangements, energy, impulsiveness fueled dynamism.
Spontaneous live performances, too. Excelled at reading audience reactions, responding spontaneously with improvisations, creating powerful unity, making each show special.
Key factor. America's view of ADHD as a trait. Supportive, accommodating environment. It's okay to do things my way. Allowed ADHD friends to enjoy band activities thoroughly.
Re-recognition of ADHD advantages in creative scenes. Intuition, inspiration provided enormous benefits in a band, despite planning scheduling challenges.
Crucial lesson. Accepting individuality invigorates the team. ADHD traits, Difficult elsewhere, often shine where freedom, creativity are demanded. America's open environment, friends' attitudes showed the wonder of embracing diversity. ADHD transformed from weakness to strength.
The chapter then discusses the seriousness of pursuing professional music.
Right, the band aimed to become pros, not just a hobby. Dream of making music their livelihood. Full commitment.
Different tension, responsibility came with that. Aspiring to pro level required it, top priority. Original songs for shows, refined through trial and error. Demanded improved skills, songwriting creativity.
Defining band identity became crucial. Discuss style, differentiation, incorporating influences with unique flair.
Beyond technical performance, live presence was essential, captivating stage action, unity. Rehearsals included staging, sound balance from audience perspective, post-show debriefing.
And the business side. Booking shows, promotion, social media flyers, coordinating recording, sending demos.
Hardest part, maintaining enthusiasm, motivation long-term in a difficult, often slow journey. Supported each other through low turnout, lack of easy results.
Key learning. Becoming a professional isn't just doing what you love. Requires effort, planning, perseverance, facing harsh realities. Setting the pro goal allowed pushing limits.
Impact of aiming pro, individual growth, deepen bond, enhance musical understanding, technique, knowledge, resilience, persistent effort. Formative years.
The chapter then describes the transition after the band broke up.
Yeah, hard to sustain financially despite passion. Break up around age 30 to focus on work, build a realistic life foundation. Felt like a dream ended.
Shift to the business world. Redirected musical energy to job. Worked on income stability.
And that's when the negative side of ADHD sometimes surfaced more noticeably. Creativity, energy were positive in the band, but caused problems in business life work sometimes.
Work expectations versus ADHD traits. Expected to plan, progress tasks methodically, but inattentiveness, prioritization issues hindered, overfocus on one task, neglecting others, jumping at new ideas, leaving tasks half-finished.
Feeling of incompetence, hurt by not meeting capable worker expectations, lost trust from missed deadlines, overlooked details, pressure unlike the accepting music world.
Difficult daily life, too. Work failures damaged self-esteem. ADHD challenges affected routines, untidy room, procrastination, increased stress.
Led to a realization about accepting traits, finding suitable work-living styles. Drew from band experience, positive ADHD aspects, tried to leverage them in business, short-term creative projects.
Crucial lesson in self-understanding. Painful period of prominent negative ADHD aspects led to reflection on suitable work environment. Combining insights with band experience revealed new workplace possibilities. Suffering became a strong foundation. The final section we're focusing on reflects on fostering self-esteem, the weight of praise from others. Starts with the official ADHD diagnosis at 49.
But the suspicion arose much earlier, college psychology class. Nearly every checklist item applied. First thought, maybe I have ADHD.
Checklist items. Easily distracted, failing plans, impulsive, overlooking details, vivid recollection. This is exactly me. Previously blamed laziness, lack of effort. Realization brought slight relief, a potential explanation.
No formal diagnosis pursued then, though. Vague sense of fitting the profile, quietly accepted. Limited public understanding support for adult ADHD back then. Didn't delve deeper.
Years of lingering thought. Constant daily struggles, inefficient planning, forgetfulness, losing focus, chipped at self-confidence. Tried to fulfill adult responsibilities but faced inability. Shrugged it off as just me.
Diagnosis at 49 felt like affirmation. I knew it. Clear name for years of difficulties. Not self-blame, but a first step to self-understanding.
Pre-diagnosis, self-berating. Constant, why can't I do this? With psychology, background, faint ADHD possibility, some emotional balance maintained. Post-diagnosis, could think about accepting using traits positively.
Late diagnosis as a chance for re-examination. Instead of being pushed by ADHD, could understand it, move towards positive living. More than a diagnosis, start of life reconstruction.
That may be thought in growing weaknesses. Unsure about ADHD, but the idea was there. Weaknesses became more apparent in daily life work, shaking self-confidence.
Work struggles described poignantly. Difficulty planning meeting deadlines, tasks effortless for others felt impossible. Overwhelm led to inaction, procrastination, questioning looks. Why can't you do something so simple?
Distractibility. Mind wandering in meetings, losing focus, missing points, leading to miscommunications.
Feeling of not meeting expectations, assumptions of not trying hard enough, unmotivated. Despite best efforts, hitting insurmountable walls, reinforcing I'm useless, creating self-doubt.
Lifeline of psychology knowledge helped. Idea of difficulties explained by traits, not laziness, prevented complete self-blame. Objective look guided by checklists, despite lack of proof then.
Lack of coping strategies, though. No deep understanding. Forced attempts to fit in increased stress highlighted weaknesses' more vicious cycle.
Looking back, preparatory stage for accepting traits. Painful time, but questioned struggles, leading to immediate acceptance upon later diagnosis. Struggles laid foundation for future compensation utilization of differences.
The chapter then compares perspectives on ADHD. Japan versus America. Japan, tendency to see hyperactive or inattentive negatively. Restlessness, not listening, seen as problematic. ADHD as not being able to do things well.
America. Often more understanding, acceptance. ADHD individuals sometimes thrive in entertainment, creative fields. Energetic, passionate, idea-rich, quick-witted qualities appreciated. Can be popular entertainers in classrooms.
Personal experience in America confirms this. ADHD traits valued in group settings, never running out of things to say, making others laugh, earned attention as funny, interesting. Speaking ability, humor appreciated, sometimes leading to leader roles. Contrast with being scolded for talking too much in Japan, boosted confidence.
Environment valuing entertainment perfect for capitalizing on traits. Engaging presentations, MC-ings. Hidden talent for making people enjoy themselves showed ADHD traits as strengths.
Changed view of own traits. From disabilities to source of interesting ideas, energy. Appreciation allowed shedding negative self-image, embracing uniqueness.
Conclusion. Cultural differences significant. American experience showed ADHD isn't a weakness but a strength in the right environment perspective. Any trait can shine with proper context.
This shift in perspective, finding an environment where traits were valued, led to discovering teaching as a new career path. Previous jobs highlighted inability, self-esteem was low. Teaching felt like using traits differently, constructively.
Positive aspects of teaching became clear quickly. Discretion over lesson content approach allowed injecting own ideas, creativity. Engaged students sparked interest, maintained focus. Eager student response was rewarding.
Unconventional teaching style emerged. Avoided sole reliance on textbooks, used games, experiments, real-life examples for relatability, enjoyment. Bored faces lit up, active participation, positive feedback increased.
Own ADHD traits became a driving force. Easily bored themselves, empathize with students, constantly change things up. Spontaneous ideas, tangents intrigue students, drawing them deeper.
Validation came from students enjoying lessons, immersing in learning unlike any other job. Realized, this works, I can create value my own way. Positive student feedback, I want to know more, I love your classes. Further motivated.
New experience of positive influence contributing to others' growth through own traits was unprecedented.
Teaching nurtured self-acceptance, embracing traits positively, transforming them into strengths. Free thinking, creativity found a niche traits went from problems to qualities. Major life turning point, prompting re-examination, more confident progress.
Then the happiest teaching memory is shared.
The 5th grade class. Student absent entire 4th grade returned after hearing about their lessons. Realized they taught more than subjects could influence feelings about school itself.
Focus on fun over studying, consistently conveyed to the anxious returning student. Gradually felt at ease, attended daily for a year, built relationships, prioritized making school a fun place. Attendance smiling was huge achievement.
Improved class environment helped too. Humor in lessons fostered open sharing. Student fit in naturally. Class became a desired place.
First confrontation. Lightly scolded for no homework, student burst into tears, took time to understand worries, suggested figuring it out together. It's okay if you can't do your homework, just do what you can, tell me how it went.
Student relieved, gradually started trying.
Key learning. Teacher's role beyond knowledge, empathy, creating growth environment. Students' return, smiles, integration was greatest reward. True meaning, children feeling comfortable, happy at school is paramount, even over academics.
But the chapter also delves into the dilemma. Balancing that educational mission with parental demands often clashed.
Teacher's primary goal. Student safety, learning, growth, joy of learning, making school fun, sometimes deviating from textbook. Parental expectations, often more rigorous instruction, better grades, especially nearing exams. Complaints about fun activity.
Example, parental demand for more homework, believing lack hindered growth. Child already stressed, increasing it might cause aversion to school. Believed homework should be manageable, but couldn't ignore parent. Attempted balance. Slightly increased homework, but told students not to do it all if too much. Questioned best interests, worried parental expectations, sidelined student needs feelings. Highlighted rewards limitations of teaching.
Key learning. Can't satisfy everyone. Teaching involves compromise for comfortable learning while appeasing parents somewhat. Dilemma never fully resolved. but deep thoughts strengthen convictions. Anchored to students smiling at school is most important for peace of mind. Tried open dialogue with parents.
Personal challenge amplified by ADHD traits. Balancing needs felt extremely challenging. Hard time being flexible with strong beliefs. I teach for the students versus meet paying parents' demands. Painful, heart wavered.
Greatest hurt. When parents' requests didn't benefit child, more homework for struggling child. Principal urged compliance. Caught between pressures, own convictions, risking being seen as failing, versus parental demands, ignoring child's feelings.
Sticking to core principle. What's best for the student? Prioritized happy attendance despite external demands. Tried simple class tasks instead of just increasing homework. Internal conflict. Is this really okay? Student smiles felt like thanks, but pressure felt like not enough. Intense stress felt limits keenly.
Ultimate learning. Cannot satisfy everyone. Any choice brings criticism. Holding firm to what's best for students kept them going. Their truth, principle refused to give up. Painful experience led to trust in convictions, even in complexity. Not losing sight of core principles crucial. Taught importance of inner compass.
The chapter then discusses emotional changes after an ADHD diagnosis, starting with the belief in being open about it, at least with one's team.
Why is that important?
Because outsiders often misunderstand traits like distractibility or forgetfulness as incompetence or laziness, affecting evaluations and trust. These common ADHD traits can seem devastating in a workplace context.
Right, so honesty helps.
It can. It helps others understand it's about the condition, not ability or effort. That understanding makes it easier to receive necessary support or accommodations to work effectively.
Examples of support.
Clearly set deadlines, regular check-ins, maybe adjustments to workflow or environment. Things essential for finding a suitable working style and maximizing performance.
But there are risks to revealing it.
Definitely. Potential prejudice, misunderstandings, being treated as disadvantaged, especially in some cultures.
So weigh the pros and cons.
Yes, but the chapter suggests the long-term benefit of honesty, getting support, might be more protective than hiding it and struggling silently with self-reproach.
Plus, others might have already noticed something's different, right?
Exactly. That person's a bit absent-minded. The diagnosis provides an explanation. But it's important when revealing it to also propose solutions.
Be proactive.
Suggest concrete ways to work better. I need support in this specific way to avoid being seen as simply incapable, because ADHD traits aren't incompetence. With the right environment, they can fuel creativity, energy.
So being open and working together for solutions can help carve out a secure workplace position.
The chapter revisits cultural views. Japan versus Western countries. Japan tends to see ADHD as a disability, influenced by culture valuing harmony, conformity, deviations seen as problematic, not normal, positive aspects often unrecognized.
Western countries, US, UK, often broader understanding, more advanced social frameworks, recognized as not rare. View of ADHD often as a characteristic can be a strength with proper environment support.
Success stories highlighted more people in entertainment, creative fields celebrated. Foster's view of succeeding because of ADHD, not despite it, possibly due to greater acceptance of diversity, robust support systems, more common individualized plans, flexible work, allows open acknowledgement, thriving using uniqueness.
Japan support lagging, still developing.
Call to action. If in a supportive environment, especially abroad, actively use resources, find suitable work learning style. Reframe ADHD, not just disabilities, but powerful individual qualities depending on environment. Hope for change in Japan, slow progress through openness, dialogue.
Then, working with ADHD in traditional Japanese companies, honestly challenging.
Yes. Culture values discipline, planning, efficiency, rule adherence. ADHD traits likely seen as lacking cooperation, incompetent. Emphasis on conformity fitting how work should be done makes traits conspicuous, causing stress. Errors. Missed deadlines judged as failing basics.
Difficulty with implicit communication, read the air, culture hard. Misunderstandings easy with non-explicit instructions.
Thriving might be possible with adaptations. Key, supportive environment. Implement structures, task tools, reminders, schedules. Openness with trusted colleagues, supervisors for support.
Transform traits into strengths.
Focus on projects benefiting from idea generation, energy, creative tasks, short-term results, frequent change.
Considering alternatives.
Incompatible culture might necessitate looking at flexible styles, meritocratic foreign firms, startups. Crucial message. Don't deny traits. Find understanding environments. Explore suitable styles. Never easy, but turning traits into strengths broadens possibilities as Japanese culture slowly accepts diversity.
The chapter then describes the diversification of earning in modern Japan.
Right. Expanded options beyond the Showa era's large companies, lifetime employment, seniority model.
Rise of side jobs. Freelancing common now. Allows choosing hours, locations. Easy to find jobs via crowdsourcing, online platforms. Connect globally.
Content creation. YouTube, blogs, social media as major income avenues. Ads, sponsorships, fan support. Unimaginable before.
Accessible investment, too. Beyond traditional stocks real estate, rare for average person in Showa. New methods like crypto, crowdfunding allow small initial investments.
Increased skill knowledge requirements, though. Old, join a company, set for life, gone. Individuals must take responsibility for income, continuously develop abilities, requires constant learning, adaptability.
Greater freedom, but potential anxiety.
Easier to use individuality for income, but many options can cause instability, anxiety. Understanding trends, staying flexible, and finding suitable work-earning methods is important.
Finally, reflecting on historical figures with potential ADHD traits.
Often labeled negatively before fame, restless, unable to follow rules. Today, ADHD is sometimes seen retrospectively as trait conducive to success. But that highlights success after the fact. Doesn't mean their path was easy.
Likely face setbacks, struggles fitting in, lack of recognition understanding.
Reason for current celebration, probably accepted traits focused on areas of leverage.
Hope for the listener. No need to despair. ADHD traits can be obstacles, but also signify potential strength.
Focus on aptitudes, not forcing into a conventional mold, but identifying developing strengths, offset weaknesses tools, support systems for attention, memory issues, pour energy into strengths.
ADHD is a tool, can lead to challenges, but also powerful for forging a unique path if accepted as a trait, strengths found.
Key message, not just they succeeded so I can too. Realize they found a way to use their traits despite difficulties so I can find my own way too.
Final encouragement. Trust, nurture aptitudes key to carving a unique path. No need to despair, potential is already within.
Exactly. Well put.
So to wrap up this deep dive, some key takeaways really stand out. ADHD is, well, it's complex. A neurodevelopmental condition. Wide range of presentations. Definitely not just a childhood issue or, a sign of laziness.
Absolutely not.
While medication can be a helpful tool for managing symptoms, it's clearly not a cure-all. Ultimately, understanding your individual traits, finding supportive environments, that seems absolutely crucial for thriving.
It really is.
And it's so important to recognize the potential strengths that can come with ADHD too. That hyperfocus, the creativity.
Definitely. They're often overlooked.
Absolutely. And for you, our learner, we really hope this deep dive has provided some valuable insights, a clearer understanding of ADHD, hopefully satisfied some curiosity, gave you actionable knowledge without feeling too overwhelmed by it all.
We hope so too. It's a lot to take in, but hopefully presented in a manageable way.
And here's a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. Think about the environments and societal structures that really best support neurodiversity. How can we shift our perspectives as a society to truly recognize and, importantly, value the unique contributions of individuals with ADHD and other neurological differences?
That's a powerful question. Moving beyond just tolerance to actual appreciation and integration.
Exactly. It's definitely a topic worth exploring further. Thanks for diving deep with us today.